Learn to paint pine trees, feathers, birds' eggs, and more, because today we are doing a woodland watercolor. Hello there, welcome back. My name is Shayda and I'm always taking viewer requests around here, and today's requested video is woodland, woodsy, foresty stuff. So I am working on a block of watercolor paper. Means all the paper is already stretched, which is awesome. This is Arch's cold pressed, 140 pound, nice and thick, and it's a little 7x10, which is a great size. I have two Kolinsky sable hair brushes. These are pointed round brushes. They have a large belly and they come to a nice fine point, and you can paint just about anything with these guys. If you're wondering about supplies, we now have a blog, so head over there to shop my supplies, because I'm using my Muñoz paints, some clean water, and then there is a giveaway. Yay! So today you can win a 12 pan set of Muñoz paints. I started with this little set and I fell in love with the brand. To enter, all you have to do is subscribe, turn those notifications on, and leave a comment below. Okay, today I am starting with greens, woodsy, foresty stuff. We're definitely gonna have some green items. So I'm starting with a really cool dark green, and then I'm also mixing up some warmer, lighter greens. And you can see kind of the greens that I'm pulling from here. They're very mossy. If you don't have a mossy green in your palette, don't worry, just mix a little brown or red into your green to get a more natural color. And then I'm moving a little brown onto the palette. And one thing I like to do is mix a bit of violet or purple into my brown to cut the yellow and darken it slightly. And actually, even though I'm happy with the green that I have here, I'm going to mix green and brown together, and it really does, you'll see it gives this very dark, natural, mossy green that I just think looks like a green you would see in the woods. So let's start there. I have a little bit of brown on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to paint sort of a broken line for the trunk of the tree. We're going to do coniferous trees today. And then here's where you really get the benefit of your pointed round brush. I have a whole bunch of green paint in the brush, and I am just allowing a little bit of that paint to sort of flow out through that pointed tip. And I'm doing almost a stippling, just a dotting motion, and making these messy branches. So the belly of the brush holds all that beautiful green paint, and then you just use the very tip and add a little pressure when it hits the page, and you make these messy dots, and that the tree just comes together. You can also see I'm pulling from both shades of green, or both colors of green. I have a bit of warm, a bit of cool, and it all mixes together to give me this beautiful, natural looking pine tree. I like the way this is coming together. Just get messy, even add a little brown into it, allow the colors to blend on the page, and it looks so natural, and it's really fun to paint these trees. You don't have to start with the tree trunk. Let's do the second tree and we'll kind of paint it a different way. So I start with these little lines, and then along each sloping, curving line, we paint, or we do our stippling. So start with a little line and then kind of mess it up, and that will create the look of the tree. I sort of paint them different every time just because they are so much fun to paint, and they're hard to mess up. You don't have to get it exactly right. There's no right way to do this. You can see for the second one, I'm adding the trunk afterwards, and the brown just sort of blends beautifully into the green, and I'm just, painting these loose pine trees, and it comes together really nicely. You can always add a little darker green on top as it dries, but that's pretty much it. Trees done. Next, we're going to paint acorns, and I am starting by mixing a yellow ochre with a bit of brown. We'll bring that paint over to the page, and I'm going to start by kind of painting a semicircle that comes to a bit of a point. We'll get really close so you can see. Semicircle that comes to a bit of a point. I left a little highlight there. And then I'm going to grab that darker brown and we are going to put a little cap, a little hat on our acorn. So it's just a little bit of a larger kind of curving line across the top. Remember, these are all natural items. The shapes can be really organic. They can be a little weird. You can paint an acorn any way you like. In fact, for the second acorn here, I'm going to paint a pear. I am going to just start with a circle. So this one's a little bit more of a circle, still leaving a bit of a highlight there. And you can see I just put a bit of paint on the page, and then I kind of figure out the shape with my brush using the paint that's already on the paper. And then same idea, using the darker brown, I give it a little curving hat kind of along the top, and the blend of the two paints is really nice. And yeah, then I just put kind of a tiny little cap on that because these acorns are angled, so you can't quite see the top, and I'm going to join them with a delicate stem. So we've got our cute little pair of acorns there. Next, I want to paint a flower. We have to do at least one flower or else it wouldn't be a Shayda Campbell tutorial. But I thought I'd do something different, and I kind of want to do a flower that's almost in the style of like a Scandinavian folk art. So I begin with a curving stem, and then I just pull that brush across the page, just add a little pressure, pull it across the page, then use the tip of the brush to refine the shape. So create the leaf by pulling that belly or dragging it across the page, then use the tip of the pointed brush to refine the shape of the leaf and maybe add a little stem or a little point. So simple little pairs of leaves. Then using a contrasting color like pink or orange or burgundy, we're going to make a messy burst up here for the top of the flower, for the bloom. You can see I'm just using a magenta from the set, and I'm adding a few brush strokes to the page. Then I kind of work the shape out a little, kind of moving the paint around on the paper. And then I just grabbed a really nice peachy pink, and I am doing these little lines with a circle at the end to make a funny statement. So this flower is not very realistic, but I think it goes with our woodland theme. I should mention that a lot of these items we're going to come back to, and we'll add detail using a wet on dry technique. So we need to wait for everything to dry before we add more detail. But moving along, I thought it would be fun to paint some berries. There's always berries in the woods. So I am just using a dark purple. I've mixed purple with burgundy and a little bit of brown to give me this rich, warm color. Then I'm going to come over here, grab a little bit of dark brown just on the tip of my brush. And I made all these random circles and ovals. They could be just about any shape, any cluster. And I am just joining them with these delicate little curving lines and, broken stems. And then I put just a little bit of dotting or even some little lines right along the top. And that really gives the look of the berry or a rose hip. Come back to the palette, and I'm mixing some of that burgundy into my green to give me a really, really mossy, very natural, almost, fall or autumn looking green. And same idea here as we used on the flower. Drag that belly of the brush across the page, and one or two brush strokes to give you the little leaf shape. Use the tip of the brush to add a point to refine the shape of each leaf, and that's that. Okay, the next thing is really fun. We're gonna paint a robin's egg or bird's egg, and the thing about this is you wanna get the color right. So I had a bit of that dark evergreen on the palette, and I am mixing in this aqua. You can see it there at the bottom. And then I also mix in a little bit of French gray. So basically this is a very dark, cool green mixed with aqua and French gray. And then when you're mixing it, just test it on scrap paper. And when you get that kind of chalky, dusty robin's egg blue, then bring that paint over to the page, and I am just working out the shape of an egg on the paper. You can see me actually guiding the paint out and moving the edge of the egg while the paint is still wet. Try to leave a highlight. One or two lighter areas will make that egg appear actually rounded. And once you're done, maybe grab just a little bit more of that nice rich robin's egg blue, and you might just add a little more to give the look of a low light as well. But we'll leave that alone, we'll let it dry, and we'll add more detail later. Now what we're going to do is mix up a creamy beige. So I'm starting by mixing white. So I bring the white paint over to the palette, and then I just mix in a little bit of brown, like a hint of brown and maybe a hint of light gray as well. And you can see here, we're going to start with some little mushrooms. And I've got this kind of creamy color. It's cream, it's beige, but it is just white paint mixed with a little bit of brown or maybe a little gray. And the mushrooms, oh my gosh, you could paint them any shape. Like I did a long, thin stem, and then I'm just kind of working out a weird little cap shape for the top. I'll get really close so you can see, but a long, thin stem. And then I'm just kind of, you know, letting that belly of the brush hit the page and just making a weird shape for the top of that mushroom. It could be anything. You could do a short, thick stem, whatever. Basically anything goes. Then I'm grabbing a little bit of dark brown and I'm just adding that dark brown to the very bottom of the stem while it is still wet. If your stem has already dried and you're not getting a good blending, just grab that beigey, milky color and add it to the brown, and you'll still get that nice blending of color, blending of the paint. And then I decided to add one more mushroom to my little cluster. This time I'm changing up the shape and doing a stubby little stem with a wider cap on the top. And I do have a video all about just mushrooms, so if you're interested in that, I will link it in the video description. And what you see me doing here is just taking a slightly darker beige, so the white with just a little bit more gray and brown in it. And I'm just adding a bit of shading right underneath the cap, where the cap meets the stem, and just making it kind of messy and random. Then I am mixing up a very dark red. So I mixed red with purple to give me this really rich burgundy color. It's always a good idea to mix a little brown in there as well, so it doesn't look, you know, too bright. If you like these muted colors that I'm using, of course, you could use any red or any orange or whatever. But we are going to use, again, this pointed round brush. I've got a ton of this red paint in the belly of the brush, so I don't have to go back to the palette very often. And I'm just letting it flow out through the very tip. And that fine point allows me to get really nice details, like creating those little dots on top. Then I had a little bit of a bleed there of the red, so I just dragged out a little more red paint and made it look like the shadow underneath was slightly red, because why wouldn't it be? That red color could be repeated below. Okay, I have let the robin's egg dry, so I wanted to just see what the speckle would look like, because this is fun. And again, that pointed round brush, I'm holding lots of paint in the brush, and then I am using just the very, very tip of that really delicate pointed brush to do these little dots. And some of them are really tiny and some of them are a little larger. You just want to take your time and, you know, make it a little messy and random. And I think the key is that not every dot will be the same size. That would be impossible. And that's a good thing, because that looks really natural. The eggs typically have all these dots that are different sizes. So use that to your advantage. And then let me ask you a question. When you make a mistake, do you just walk away and leave it alone, or do you keep going? Do you walk further into the mistake? That's what I do. I won't leave it alone. Once I start a mistake, I just keep going. And that's what I did here. I started using a darker blue and it kind of bled with the dark black speckle. And so basically I just messed up the egg, but I'm going to come back to that and I am going to redeem myself. So watch until the end of the video. Okay, next thing we're doing is painting a feather. I have a really, really watery brown. I just use that beigey color to do like a curving line for the quill. And then using that really nice light brown, I'm kind of using the brush and flicking it outward and kind of painting the feather one little line at a time. I've marked out a few little spots there. You can do some little white spots if you want, but you can ignore that as well. And then I keep painting the feather, doing these tiny little lines. And I changed up the color of the brown. I grabbed from a slightly darker area, and then you can see now I'm using a bit more of a washed out dark brown. So I keep kind of changing which area of the palette I'm grabbing from, and that gives me this really nice natural blend of color. But you're just kind of working out the shape of a feather. If it would help you, do an outline in pencil so you kind of know where to stop your brush stroke. But yeah, while the paint is still wet, you can actually move it around a little bit, so that'll help too to get the shape right. And then use that beigey color that we used for the mushroom and for the quill to do some really tiny little curving lines there at the top of the feather or at the bottom. But it's the top on this one. Okay, we are going to keep moving. We got a lot of woodland things to paint. So using that milky beige again, we're gonna do another egg. I have to do another egg basically because I don't like the way that one turned out. It's not terrible, but I was planning on doing 2 eggs anyways. So this one, I'm working out the shape, left a little highlight. Again, while the paint is wet, you can move that edge, you can work out the shape on the paper, add a little bit of a darker beige to 1 or 2 sides there just to give a low light, and then leave it alone, let it dry. Finally, the last thing we are going to paint before we start adding all the detail to these items is a fern. And you can see I've done a little curving line in pencil. Then I'm using a really mossy, warm green, and I am just painting these tiny little leaves. They get a little larger as I move down the stem, and they're all kind of angled up towards the top of the fern. Then, as we move down the stem, we start to paint little branches, each with multiple leaves on them. So in that way, we create a really detailed fern that's just made up of little branches and leaves. Just like with the trees, I am sort of pulling from different areas of the green on the palette. So I have my warm green and I have my cooler green. I have my green with a lot of brown mixed in, and I'm using all of those. And the result is this really organic looking, very lively fern, I think, because you see all the different shades of green. And it looks like I picked it right out of the forest. Okay, as promised, we are now going to do a little wet on dry. That is just what it sounds like. It means using our wet paint on parts of the painting that are already dry or on dry paper. And this is a great way to add detail. Wet on dry gives you a lot of control because the paint isn't bleeding. You can see I can add a darker ochre color here to my acorns, and I can make the shadow shape anything I like, and it's not gonna move, it's not gonna go anywhere. So I've got all this control, and I can add some real, dark, rich colors to the items that are already there. I get a lot of questions about paintings looking flat, and I get that. Sometimes watercolors do look a little washed out, don't they, when you first put them on the page and then let them dry? Look how flat that feather looks right now. But we're going to add some nice rich color as we do this wet on dry. So with the mushrooms, I'm just adding a bit of a darker brown, kind of adding to the shape, adding to the shadow. I'll add just like a hint of dark brown to the tree trunk. Why not? I added a little bit of dark purple to the berries. I'm going to fix up this feather. I want to add these really thin dark brown brush strokes to help with the color, to help with the nice rich color, but also to help with the look of the feather being, basically feathered for lack of a better word. So I'm using some dark rich brown and adding these really thin feathery strokes. Then I'm also going to add these black dots just to get a bit of a pattern going on our feather. And I think it looks so much better. It looked flat before. The flower is a nice rich color, but why not just add a bit of a darker red, a few brush strokes, just bring it to life. And then this egg, I'm gonna redeem myself with this egg. I am adding the shading before I do the dotting. You can see I almost started the dotting, but no, I stopped, I learned. I'm using a darker beige, so just white with a bit of brown in it. And I'm just adding a messy shadow. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that really dark, almost black brown, just on the very tip of my brush. And I'm just going to add all these dots. And this shading that I did had already dried. It dried really quickly because it was just like a little spot. Remember to make your little spots and splotches different sizes. I've had some really large ones on this one because it's kind of like a duck egg. And then that's pretty much it for my wet on dry. I just decided to add a few little leaves to my composition to help with the balance and the overall look of the piece. But yeah, that's it for the woodland foresty items. Okay, last thing though, I did try to add a highlight to my egg that I mussed up, and it's really simple. You take a paper knife, kind of scratch at the page, erase, get rid of the dust, and you'll get some highlights. It's a great way to get kind of white back into your watercolor painting if you lose it. And that is all done. I'm really happy with my foresty woodland items. All we need now is like a little gnome or something, maybe in another video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and comment to be entered in the giveaway, and I will see you soon with a new tutorial.